The girl was catching insects in the forest when she suddenly heard a roar in the distance. She cautiously looked forward and found a tiger lurking in the grass not far away. The girl had a natural passion for animals, and this was the first tiger she had ever seen with her own eyes. However, at this moment, the person next to him suddenly opened fire. The girl angrily asked why he had opened fire, when the tiger clearly had not been preparing to attack her. But the other party said that this beast was very dangerous and had attacked livestock on the island. The girl's name is Marianne. Her father is the chief consul, holding the highest authority on this colonial island. But every pampered official lady seems to have a rebellious heart. That day, Marianne reluctantly let the servants lace her into a corset, because her stepmother found her a blind date today. A young English knight, hoping to facilitate the marriage. But Marianne was still young and deeply resistant to her parents' traditional ideas. She had no desire to decide her entire future this way, so she discussed it with the servant and decided to find a way to get rid of the guy. Marianne did not even put on heels. She walked out barefoot on purpose, determined to show the suitor her most disheveled side. Then the two got to know each other politely. Immediately afterwards, the girl deliberately stretched out her bare feet, embarrassing the stepmother and the blind date opposite her. However, this is not enough. Marianne leaned back in her chair, waiting for the servant to serve tea to this distinguished guest from afar. But it can be seen from the look between the two that this cup of tea is destined to be extraordinary. The young English gentleman was clearly annoyed, because this way of treating a guest was hard to accept. But Marianne is the consul chief's only daughter, and no one dares to offend her on this island despite being so arrogant.
London?
Marianne doesn't want to go to London. She was used to living here, so she hurried to her father's office and asked him to leave her.
I'm not going to live forever, my dear. I don't do this with a light heart. You know, when your mother died, you remained the one light in my life.
Her father's most loving words deeply touched her daughter. However, at this moment, the adjutant received some unfortunate news. Their merchant ship was attacked by pirates, and the crew was even more injured. Later, the consul chief came to the station hospital to visit the injured crew members. Judging from what he learned, he seemed to already know who this group of people was. Anyone daring enough to attack British ships would have to pay a heavy price. At this time, the pirates were approaching Namin Island. There are rich mineral resources there, and everyone dreams of making a fortune. So the captain planned to take one person with him and take a small boat to explore the island first. The dream was sweet, but reality was brutal. Disaster was already closing in. Just as the captain and his men left the ship, a British warship led by the pirate hunter Lord Brooke had already locked onto its target and was preparing to deliver a deadly blow. When a huge warship appeared in front of them, the crew members responsible for the lookout suddenly felt bad. As soon as he handed the telescope to the first mate, it was already too late. Only then did the pirates realize that the British gunboats had not spared even a small boat, and they were obviously trying to kill them all. And indeed it is. Before several people could react, the whistling sound of British artillery shells came again. They were helpless in the face of the onslaught. On the other side, Marianne seems to be in a bad mood today. Perhaps because she missed her deceased mother, she rode a horse to the beach alone and let the sea breeze blow away the melancholy in her heart. However, she never expected that there was someone lying there not far from her. It seems to be fate, and this person is the pirate captain Sandokan, who was shot down by gunfire. The girl didn't understand the situation, but out of kindness she decided to help. When Sandokan slowly woke from his coma, the first thing he did was draw a sharp breath. Then, a beautiful girl appeared in front of him. After Marianne introduced herself carefully, Sandokan lied that he was a businessman and had been attacked by pirates to hide his true identity. Because among the wounded nearby were British men who had been robbed by them, he just hoped that he would not be recognized by the other party. Soon, the time came to the next day. Sandokan is recovering well. In order to build a good relationship with this wealthy lady, the two even rode horses around the island and told each other about each other's life experiences. Marianne's biological mother has died, and Sandokan never knew who his father was. This similar pain makes the two seem to have a natural sense of closeness. At the same time, there seemed to be a person lying on the beach. Sandokan immediately realized that it might be his companion who was shelled by the British Army yesterday, so he hurried forward to check. This is indeed the case.
Is he one of your men?
He's my servant.
The two people on the small boat were saved. but the pirates on the big boat were either killed by cannonballs or captured by the British Army. As a pirate hunter, Lord Brooke also picked up a precious piece of jewelry from a dead man, and this thing will be of great use in a few days. As the scene changes, the situation of the companions rescued by Sandokan is not optimistic, and his life may be in danger at any time. For this reason, Marianne specially assigned her personal maid Sani to take care of him. However, what is absolutely unexpected is that the two people are from the same tribe. When British forces conquered the Malay Peninsula, many local people were killed, including Sani's parents, but Sani's brother survived, only to be forced into slave labor in the mines. Meanwhile, the man tells Sani that Sandokan is not a merchant, but a real pirate. The reason why he told her frankly was because Sandokan once saved his life. He hopes Sani can help Sandokan and free the imprisoned pirates. As a breeze blew by, the man's life ended. On the other side, the chief consul is holding a celebration cocktail party for Lord Brooke. After all, it is not easy to get rid of this group of pirates, but at this moment, Marianne came down from upstairs wearing a skirt. Lord Brooke could hardly take his eyes off such a captivating girl. As the saying goes, even the toughest man can lose his edge in front of beauty. Soon, the time came to 3 days later. Today is Marianne's 21st birthday. The consul's father specially held a party at the mansion. When this wealthy lady appeared in a skirt, her beautiful appearance made others envious. At the same time, King Hashim specially sent a congratulatory gift to the eldest lady in order to establish good relations with the British. A dazzling array of jewelry was displayed in front of her, but Marianne thought it was like visiting a market. Not only that, King Hashim also specially prepared a little monkey in a cage, hoping to win the heart of the other party. However, Marianne has been passionate about freedom since she was a child and pitted all life that was bound. So she opened the cage without hesitation. The little monkey was like an elf breaking free from the shackles, scurrying back and forth among the crowd, which actually added a bit of fun to the party. At this time, Lord Brooke came to the girl and presented his gift. It was a valuable emerald bracelet that was simply enviable to others. Moreover, the Lord personally put the bracelet on the eldest lady's hand to show his love. Then, like a couple who just fell in love, they walked onto the dance floor arm in arm. After a while, the man who claimed to be a businessman also came to Marianne, sent his most sincere birthday wishes, and invited the girl to dance. This made Lord Brooke next to him somewhat jealous. In fact, Marianne admired this mighty man. Every move he made radiated raw masculine energy. The girl was drawn to that kind of strength, especially the moment he lifted her. It captured her heart instantly. Maybe this is what it feels like. Gentle flattery cannot compete with instinctive heartbeat, and polite restraint cannot compete with fatal attraction. When Sandokan lifted her a second time, that wildness and strength completely overwhelmed Marianne and quietly broke Lord Brooke's heart. But Brooke's suspicion of Sandokan's true identity has never stopped. He has sent a carrier pigeon to Singapore to investigate, and he will know who this so-called businessman is before dawn. As the music slows down, the party comes to an end. Lord Brooke chatted with King Hashim in the courtyard. Suddenly, Sani passed by and accidentally bumped into the king, and the atmosphere immediately became quiet. King Hashim lost face in public. He had arrived in high spirits, only to leave in humiliation. Brooke once again played the hero rescuing a beauty, but Sani had no idea she had offended the wrong person this time. Sani, who was hiding alone in the corner, cried bitterly. Not only did she feel wrong just now, but more importantly, she missed her brother who was still a slave. Both of her parents are dead, and her brother is her only relative. Sandokan promised Sani that he would rescue her brother. They planned to rescue the imprisoned pirates. Because the so-called businessman is actually the pirate leader, he just deliberately hides his identity and lurks here. And tonight is obviously a good opportunity. Afterward, Sani quietly took 2 bottles of red wine to the guards outside, planning to distract them and knock them out. But one of the men was difficult to deal with. He insisted on dragging Sani into a remote corner and tried to force himself on her. Sani refused him, which only angered the soldier. Just as the soldier was about to attack, Sandokan appeared in time and killed him. The 2 men successfully obtained the keys to the prison. The imprisoned pirates have been waiting for a long time. At this time, a soldier discovered the situation and was about to shout loudly, but was stabbed to death by the pirates behind him. Immediately afterwards, Sandokan broke in, holding the prison key, and successfully brought hope to his companions. On the other side, the eldest lady was looking for her personal maid, but she almost tripped. Before she could react, Marianne was controlled by Sandokan. When she saw Sani with each other, Marianne realized that she had been deceived by these 2 people, but now it's too late. The pirates even took her as a hostage and took her away from the consular base. Early the next morning, Lord Brooke received an urgent letter. Only then did he suddenly realize that the businessman was the real pirate leader, so he led his men to the base. The entire yard was filled with the bodies of the guards, and the prisoners in the cells had long since vanished. As a famous pirate hunter, how could Lord Brooke possibly swallow this humiliation? Besides, his beloved girl is still on board. Anger and worry surged through him all at once, but even more angry was the high-ranking father of the kidnapped girl. Marianne's father was the largest official in the colony, but he was tricked by a group of pirates, so he ordered the pirates to be hunted down immediately. On the other side, Marianne was let go. Because Sandokan's deputy was suffering from a high fever, he knew that the girl was knowledgeable and had some medical skills, so he wanted to ask her to help treat him. Although Marianne hated Sandokan deeply, in order to continue to live, she could only do what the captain asked. On a nearby island, Marianne and Sonny collect herbs. She took advantage of the caretaker's inattention and asked Sonny to help her escape, promising to forget about the past. She also said that she had always regarded Sonny as her biological sister. Couldn't she help her this time because of the past friendship? But Sonny saw the situation clearly. Even though the young lady treated her well, the British were still enemies in Sonny's eyes. However, on the way to collect herbs, Marianne looked towards the seaside and suddenly had an idea. She must fight for her own chance to escape, so she lied that she had an urgent need to urinate. And after greeting the guarding pirates, she went to a remote place alone, but she was not actually going there to relieve herself. Hidden by the plants, she tore a piece from her skirt, cut her finger on a thorn, and wrote a distress message in blood. She wanted people looking for her to see it. The wandering life continues. The young lady, who had never done rough work before, now had to labor alongside the men, but her delicate frame caused little mishaps from time to time, making the men on the boat laugh. Of course, some people have other intentions. One of the pirates noticed Marianne's beauty, had vile thoughts, and began trying to touch her. Seeing that the situation was not good, Sandokan dragged Marianne and quickly left the crowd. He also understood that these unruly men knew only how to steal money and goods, and had no idea what restraint meant, so he forced the girl into the cabin. Marianne arrogantly assumed he wanted to keep her for himself. Unexpectedly, the captain just threw a piece of clothing to her and asked her to wrap herself more tightly. At the same time, he asked her to tie her hair up so that other men would not have any inappropriate thoughts. It seemed that even as a pirate, Sandokan still kept a clear line he would not cross with her. He seemed tough and arrogant, but in fact he was completely protective of her and didn't want anyone to hurt her. But soon, things changed again. The girl couldn't sleep at night. She wanted to relax on the deck, but she attracted the attention of the guy who had done something during the day. Just as Marianne was looking at the sea and missing her elderly father, a big hand blocked her mouth. The girl struggled hard but couldn't break free from the other party's restraints. Just when she was about to be assaulted, Sandokan appeared again. More people arrived after hearing the commotion, and everyone witnessed the vile act of their own companion. Sandokan bluntly called him a coward. The man couldn't bear it anymore, and after letting Marianne go, he decided to compete with Sandokan. Unable to fight fairly, the man pulled out a dagger and stabbed the unguarded Sandokan. But a man does not become captain without real skill. After a few rounds, the opponent was no match for him. Marianne escaped this crisis, but she could not imagine what she would encounter in the future, and her feeling of missing her relatives became even stronger. But what she did not know was that her father was not indifferent. The chief consul has not eaten much for a day or two, and his worry about his daughter has reached its peak. But his second wife had the nerve to make sarcastic remarks at that moment, suggesting Marianne might have left with the pirates willingly. The chief consul finally couldn't bear it anymore and slapped her hard. On the other side, the British warships had been wandering at sea for several days, but there was still no sign of the pirate ship. The exhausted Lord Brooke was growing restless. However, just as he was changing course, the Lord unexpectedly discovered something through the telescope. Yes, a piece of white fabric is blowing in the wind. This seemed to give him hope, so he immediately ordered to approach the island, and then landed in a small boat to check it out. Indeed, the writing on it was indeed a distress signal left by Marianne and pointed out the whereabouts of the pirates. The scene changes and the pirate ship is about to arrive at its destination. In front of you is the island of Kalimantan occupied by the Dutch, which is rich in mineral resources. The local Dyaks were regarded as slave laborers by the Dutch and lived a life worse than death every day. Marianne couldn't believe her eyes. She witnessed history through a telescope. She saw the Dutch acting as colonial masters, forcing Southeast Asians into slave labor and frantically plundering strategic minerals. thousands of Southeast Asians endure harsh conditions and live under the whips of the other side, and there is no so-called freedom at all. And this girl, who shared their background, was truly shaken. She questioned Sandokan, saying they condemned the British, yet they were no nobler than the British themselves. The Dutch plundered the minerals, the British bought from them, and the pirates carved up the region's wealth and lives through theft. Sandokan was a little shaken. After all, his original intention of resisting was never to become another predator, but he still had a band of brothers who needed to survive. So he decided this would be their final raid. So they took advantage of the night and quietly landed ashore with weapons. While the Dutch were not paying attention, the pirates launched a sudden attack and quickly eliminated the mine guards. Immediately afterwards, everyone divided into two groups. The pirates went straight to the transport ship pulling the oar, while Sani went to find her long-lost brother. This group of workers was bound by iron chains, their bodies covered with dirt, and their faces were unrecognizable. From their faces alone, Sani could barely tell whether her brother was among them. When she exposed the tattoo on her neck, the woman opposite seemed to notice something, and then pointed at a boy with dull eyes. Yes, this is the brother Sani has been looking for. It's just that the boy has been destroyed by fate and is like a dead tree, leaving only a soulless body. After several confirmations, he finally recognized that the person in front of him was his sister. At that moment, tears burst from his eyes. Their parents died at the gunpoint of the colonists, and now their brother's life as a laborer is worse than death. The brother and sister reunited despite the hardships, only to be filled with despair and pain that they had nowhere to tell. However, the good times did not last long. Just when Sandokan and his brothers were planning to rob the transport ship, something happened to the pirate ship he was hiding in advance. The boy on the boat was awakened from his deep sleep by a slight movement. When he tried to look back, he saw that the British warships pursuing them were close at hand. Seeing that the situation was not good, the boy immediately fired a flare. The glare of the flare shone in the night sky. Sandokan immediately realized that the pirate hunter he couldn't get rid of was still here. Things have changed now. In order to escape the pursuit of the British army, they must give up this opportunity to make a fortune. As the saying goes, wealth is gained in danger, but also lost in danger. The most important thing now is to save one's life. On the other side, Sani was trying her best to break the chains on her brother's body. At this time, Sandokan hurriedly came to inform her that she must evacuate quickly, otherwise it would be too late. But as someone who shared the same roots as these people, Sani could not simply watch them die without trying to save them, especially her own brother. Seeing that the siblings could not let go, the pirates had no choice but to force the issue, lift Sani away, and quickly leave that dangerous place. No one knew whether Sani and her brother would ever have the chance to meet again in this life. Later, Sandokan led his brothers back the same way. However, an accident happened again, and the British army was lurking in the woods. The hunters had become the hunted. Marianne is the pirate's shield. As long as he holds this official lady in the palm of his hand, he will not be afraid of any threats from the British army. The officer in red clothes next to him asked Brooke to put down his weapon quickly to prevent the other party from harming the eldest lady. But this hunter, who frightened the pirates, was always proud of his courage. So how could he give up? Reality finally defeated the will. Brooke threw down his weapon and could only watch as the woman he loved was taken away again. Although this rescue failed, it does not mean that Brooke will give up. Soon, it was early morning the next day. The pirate ship set sail again. This time they were going to Singapore, which was also Sandokan's home base. It's just that everyone has been working hard for several days, but nothing has been achieved, which is really unacceptable. Sandokan suddenly had a new plan. He wants to use Marianne as a bargaining chip to demand a ransom from Marianne's father, so that he can extract more money. Everyone thought the suggestion was good and raised their hands in agreement, but these words also hurt Marianne completely. In this way, the pirate ship finally arrived in Singapore after traveling for several days. The British warships followed closely behind and also came to this world belonging to the Chinese. Brooke immediately tried to communicate with the local police station. In the name of the empire on which the sun never sets, he hopes to get the other party's cooperation to arrest the pirates. But this place was beyond easy control, and even the British could not simply do whatever they wanted here. So the sheriff rejected Brooke's request for various reasons. At the same time, after the two left, the police chief specifically asked his men to inform Sandokan. It seemed the local authorities and the underworld had long been working together. After Brooke left the police station, he wanted to clear his head nearby and asked his companions to return to the ship first. Little did he know that not long after he left, he was stared at by a boy behind him. Brooke is very alert, detects a threat from behind, and immediately strikes preemptively. Sure enough, ever since this group of British people set foot in Singapore, everything has been in the hands of pirates. Later, the boy took him to a secluded place. Sandokan has indeed been waiting here for a long time. There was not much communication between the two parties, and Sandokan directly made a request for the consul chief to pay the appropriate ransom. Otherwise, Marianne's family will never see her again in their lifetime. The scene changed when Marianne's father received the letter. He immediately signed the check, although his wife reminded him that he was using public property. The consul chief believed that saving his daughter was more important, and he no longer cared about rules and consequences. As long as he could get his daughter back safely, let alone a ransom, he would not hesitate to spend everything he had. On the other side, the Chinese in Singapore are about to usher in the new year. In this traditional festive atmosphere, Marianne was invited to celebrate with the pirates. When she appeared in gorgeous clothes, even the unruly pirate leader lost his mind for an instant. He never would have imagined that the girl he kidnapped could be so beautiful. So as the new year approaches, the two might as well dance together in the Chinese district. After all, in 2 hours, Marianne would leave once the ransom arrived, and they might never see each other again.
Let's lay down our arms for tonight.
You're a real bastard.
Sandokan extended his hand and invited her to dance, and Marianne had little choice but to accept. On the other side, the British army responsible for rescuing the eldest lady prepared a whole box of gold coins. Led by Lord Brooke, they set out for the exchange point designated by the pirates. However, when they arrived at their destination, they did not see the eldest lady. In fact, for safety reasons, the pirates only allowed Brooke to go, and the rest could only wait where they were. In this case, Brooke simply handed over the weapon he was wearing, and then he was blindfolded by the other party and carried the gold coins to the next trading point. At this time, Marianne and Sandokan were getting better at dancing during these days together. Although she was the pirate's bargaining chip, Sandokan had shown her no malice, and the girl had even begun to feel something different for him. At this moment, fireworks sparkled in the night sky and the New Year's bell rang. In such a warm moment, the girl even couldn't help but want to ask for a kiss, but was interrupted by her companion behind her. It turned out the fireworks were the signal that Brooke was ready, and that she would soon be going home. Not long after, Brooke was taken into the Chinese quarter by pirates, and finally met his beloved girl. Sandokan also kept his promise and allowed both parties to leave after confirming that the ransom was in place and Marianne was safe. No one knew whether there would ever be another chance to see Sandokan in this life. After nearly a month of pursuit, the British warship finally returned. The girl put on a new green dress, specially made for her before the voyage by Brooke's Indian nurse. It seems that this man is very caring. He never talks about caring, but hides his tenderness in the most delicate places. In order to get closer to Marianne, he even told her a secret. It turned out that Brooke's Indian nurse was not an ordinary servant, but his biological mother.
Why tell me?
Because I want to put my life in your hands.
I want to be honest with you too. When I was in the jungle,
What happened in the jungle is the past. The future is the only thing that counts, and you don't have to answer now, I can wait.
The girl's polite smile did not mean she truly loved him. She simply could not face the feeling in her heart. After several days of sailing, the British Army finally returned to the consular base. Everything is not easy. Brooke finally kept his promise and brought the young lady back safely, allowing the consul's heart to settle at last. Later, the father and daughter hugged each other and cried. Meanwhile, Brooke appeared a little too close to his Indian mother. This made everyone present suspicious, especially the consul chief's wife. It can be seen from the strange expression of this woman that she is very scheming and even hinted something to the attendant next to her. Perhaps she saw the unusual relationship between the two. That night, Brooke told his mother about the secret he had shared with Marianne, but his mother thinks he trusts others too much. Once the secret is leaked, Brooke's painstakingly cultivated image will completely collapse. In that colonial era, where prejudice stood like an iron wall, being an Englishman of mixed Indian heritage was enough to destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. Not to mention marrying the consul chief's daughter. Just like that, after a peaceful day, Marianne was suddenly awakened by the sound outside. She walked out of the door curiously, wanting to find out what happened. No one expected that the once feared pirate Sandokan would be captured by King Hashim and presented to the consul general as a grand gift. However, at this moment, Marianne ran out of the house. She caressed Sandokan's wounds without any scruples and kept questioning them about what they had done to him.
Marianne. Marianne.
What did you?
Marianne, come away.
What did you do to him?
The scene was completely out of control. No one could imagine that Marianne fell in love with this pirate, and from all indications, she loved him heartily. After she realized that the other party was being tortured, she was overcome with grief and fainted. This also gave Brooke a painful lesson. It turned out he had been fooling himself all along. All the protection and efforts were in vain at this moment. Seeing him like this, his mother felt really uncomfortable, so she could only leave temporarily and let Brooke resolve her depression alone. Meanwhile, Marianne woke from her coma and found the doctor examining her. The girl was so frightened that she immediately drove the doctor out. Yet parents outside are waiting for the results. The doctor believed that Marianne was suffering from hysteria and asked if there was any history of mental illness in the family. Only then did everyone reveal that Marianne's mother died in a mental hospital and committed suicide. Hearing this, Marianne never expected that her mother actually died in a mental hospital, and her father had been hiding the truth. What exactly is going on here? Could she really have a family history of mental illness? Thinking of this, Marianne suddenly recalled the dress her mother left for her after her death, and an envelope without a letter. She picked up this relic and cried bitterly, not knowing what kind of suffering her mother had suffered. However, at this moment, she unexpectedly discovered a hole in her skirt. Then she thought of the words on the envelope and suddenly realized something. Immediately afterwards, she quickly took the skirt to the balcony, and through the sunlight, she discovered that there was something hidden inside. So Marianne hurriedly picked up the scissors and carefully cut along the hole, only to find a note. It turns out that this was the cause of death that her mother deliberately left for her when she was in the lunatic asylum. Marianne didn't have time to think too much and immediately searched along the skirt, and more notes were revealed at this time. It turned out that her mother had not been mentally ill. After Marianne was born, her father often traveled between Britain and Southeast Asia for work, sometimes staying away for a year or even longer. Her mother, left alone for long stretches of time, spent her days wasting away in loneliness. Then her father met the young and beautiful woman in Southeast Asia who would become Marianne's stepmother. Greedy for the family fortune, the stepmother could not tolerate Marianne's mother. She secretly bribed people to slander her mother because she was away from home all year round. She also forged evidence to make Marianne's father believe his wife was truly ill, convincing him to send her to an asylum. When the father was away, the stepmother made things difficult for the mother and cut off her care. The mother was desperate and chose to commit suicide, leaving only this skirt full of notes to express her grievances. Marianne had just learned about the cause of her mother's death when her stepmother came to deliver breakfast. The girl was extremely disappointed with this family, especially this hypocritical stepmother. Now, Marianne just wants to figure out one thing. Was her mother still alive when her father came back from a business trip?
When Papa came back, was Mother still alive? Insane people are dangerous. Answer me! She was still alive.
The girl didn't realize until now that her father had been indulging this bad woman, so she went to her father's office without hesitation. At this time, an infatuated man came to propose marriage in the consul chief's office. Lord Brooke loved Marianne deeply, but the chief consul seemed to know some secrets. As a white aristocratic family, he would never allow his daughter to marry a man of mixed Indian heritage. Not only was Brooke insulted, he could hardly believe it, since he had only told Marianne the truth about his birth. Could it be that the girl he liked betrayed him? However, Brooke returned to her residence with this question, and when she saw the scars on her mother's face, she finally understood everything. It turned out that the night before, while his mother was praying in the yard, she had been attacked from behind, and the person behind her kidnapping was Marianne's stepmother. This woman is extremely sinister and controls everything in the family. At this time, Brooke's eyes were filled with murderous intent and she was determined to make those who hurt them pay the price. At the same time, Marianne is seeking justice for her mother. She broke into the consul chief's office and asked her father why he was so cruel. He kept saying that he loved his mother deeply, but he allowed her to die in the lunatic asylum. The mother's matter has not yet been resolved and has been involved in many murder cases. As a colonial official, her father had massacred many local residents in Southeast Asia. Such a heinous crime was seen by her father as nothing more than his duty. He asked Marianne not to hate him for it, but Marianne didn't think so. She asked her father to atone for his sins, free the slaves who worked in the mining areas, and pardon the pirate Sandokan's crimes.
Tomorrow Sandokan will be hanged and you will leave for London, and with appropriate care, God willing.
Marianne couldn't imagine that her father could be such a ruthless killer, let alone care about her inner feelings. A strong despair instantly filled her heart. so she left with tearing pain. The adjutant ran outside anxiously and tried to intercept Marianne, who was riding away. But at this time the girl was so heartbroken that no one could stop her from leaving. At the same time, Brooke happens to see this scene and realizes that Marianne may have lost her mind. With her determined look, she clearly had the intention of never returning, and indeed it is. Marianne rode to a beach, seemingly losing the courage to live. Her mother died unjustly in a lunatic asylum, and now the man she loved is about to be hanged. All this pain and despair completely submerged her like a tide. She stood on the cliff and looked at the endless dark sea. She felt that the world was so big that there was no place for her. Perhaps the only way to escape this endless torture is to jump down. But at the critical moment, Brooke suddenly appeared. Marianne said Sandokan would be hanged and she would be sent to a medical facility. She had no choice. Brooke told her that people always have choices. When Marianne said she would rather die than lose her freedom, Brooke said he could save Sandokan. The girl stopped jumping off the cliff. Brooke admitted that he would do anything to save Sandokan, but he has a selfish condition. That is, Marianne must promise to give up that man, to save the man she loved. The girl gave up the thought of ending her life, gritted her teeth, and agreed to this cruel bargain. In this way, Marianne returned to the consular base. The adjutant had been waiting in the yard, fearing that something might happen to her. Fortunately, the girl came back safe and sound. However, Marianne knew clearly that the adjutant had followed her father since youth and had also taken part in the massacre of Southeast Asians. Doesn't he feel guilty in his heart? That's countless lives. At this point, the man seemed to be stabbed hard by the past, and his face instantly darkened, so the adjutant agreed to do something for Marianne. He took the girl to the prison, asked Marianne to hide first, and then used his official position to call out the guards guarding her, thus creating an opportunity for her to meet Sandokan, two people who were cruelly teased by fate, separated by life, death and shackles, finally reunited briefly in this dark and damp corner. The moment their eyes met, 1,000 words were caught in their throats. With so little time left, they could only use their actions to give each other the love they still carried. The girl looked ahead with dull eyes, because the man she liked was about to be hanged. But when the prison guards came to arrest the prisoner, they found that Sandokan had fainted and died in prison prematurely. When the officers arrived to determine whether this was an accidental collapse or a deliberate attempt to fake death and avoid execution, the doctor found a bottle nearby and concluded that Sandokan had suffocated. But where did this bottle of medicine come from? The chief consul tried to ask the adjutant. After all, he was on the last shift last night, but the adjutant said calmly that he didn't know anything. King Hashim was very anxious. After all, he was the one who captured the pirate leader in the first place. If there is something fishy here, Sandokan will definitely take revenge on him, so he insisted that even if Sandokan was dead, they should still tie him up again, just to avoid any hidden danger. But Lord Brooke doesn't think so. This approach is too inhumane, so he suggested throwing the body into the wilderness, where it would become food for wild animals. The chief consul agreed with him. Then King Hashim took a tiger tooth from his body, muttered a curse, and stuffed it into Sandokan's mouth. This man was so hateful that Sandokan would never let him go, not even as a ghost. So, after the two British soldiers carried the body to the wild, they quickly returned the same way. The outcome of all this was actually planned by Marianne and Lord Brooke. It turned out that just a day before, with help from the adjutant, Marianne had quietly entered the prison, met her beloved, and handed him a bottle of medicine. This was a strange medicine Brooke's Indian mother had specially found through her own hidden knowledge. After taking it, the person's breath will be weak and the pulse will almost disappear, showing a state of suspended animation that is no different from death by suffocation. Even experienced military doctors find it difficult to tell the difference. Now Marianne can only pray and hope that her lover can survive this difficult time. On the other side, the unconscious Sandokan really woke up. At just the right moment, Brooke and his mother arrived as well. Apparently the plan went very well. Brooke also prepared a boat for the other party, hoping that he could board the boat immediately and go away from this land full of hatred. When Brooke returned at night, the girl was squatting in the corner, praying sincerely for her lover. Brooke tells her that everything is going well and Sandokan is still alive. He said Sandokan's last words were that he would always be there for her. Brooke thought that after saving Sandokan, Marianne would be willing to follow him. But this is an unequal exchange. Doomed from the beginning, touching cannot be exchanged for heartbeat, and kindness cannot be exchanged for deep love. Soon, the time came a few days later. Sandokan returned to the pirate ship smoothly, and the brothers were happy that their boss had returned safely. But now is not the time to celebrate, because Sandokan wanted revenge. He set sail for Hashim's palace, determined to make the king who framed him, send him to death row, and tried to leave him without even a proper body pay in blood. The entire palace must pay a heavy price for his viciousness. At this point the king was completely panicked. According to reports from his men, a pirate ship is heading here. The king quickly picked up the telescope and checked, and it turned out to be Sandokan's group, but he is obviously dead. Could this be a well-planned scam? But now it's too late to escape, so we can only send our men to fight to the death. But King Hashem was only a puppet ruler, and this place had long been under British control. He has no actual army, and just a few of his men cannot resist the fierce pirates. Not long after, Sandokan led people into the palace, but after searching, he didn't see the king. At this time, the king was ordering his attendants to take 2 boxes of gold and silver jewelry and prepare to escape from the back, but the jewelry was spilled all over the floor by the attendant. This guy brought it all upon himself and is cruel to everyone, but now was not the time to play dead, because Sandokan had already arrived. Seeing that the situation was not good, the king immediately hid behind a pillar, preparing to deliver a fatal blow from the darkness. However, at this critical moment, the situation took an unimaginable turn. Sandokan never imagined that Marianne would appear here and save his life again. 2 lonely souls reunited. Time has carved wind and frost on them, but it has not been able to erase the obsession in their hearts. So the 2 hugged each other tightly, having long forgotten the vow they made to Lord Brooke.
Sorry to interrupt. You don't have much time.
It turns out that Brooke received the order and was leading the soldiers to move closer. Without further delay, Sandokan must leave the palace as soon as possible. When the British troops arrived with weapons, only bodies were left scattered across the ground. The pirates had long since disappeared, and the king died tragically in the middle of the hall. Why shouldn't Brooke take over and become the new master here?
How you have your kingdom? The lady sends her regards, while flattered by your offer.
The adjutant made it clear, Marianne could never become Brooke's wife, but he had not been left with nothing. At least he still had the palace. All those experiences of being looked down upon by the British because of their mixed race identity, those days and nights of gritting their teeth and the cold eyes and prejudices, all disappeared at this moment. On the other side, Marianne followed her lover on the pirate ship and left the family that had wounded her so badly. From then on, she embarked on the road to freedom.